Welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. It is Sunday morning, May the 5th, and like yesterday, I woke up a little bit late today. I woke up at quarter to six, same time. I've had this tendency to wake up somewhere around, I think I was dreaming around 1:32 in the morning, so I got up to write those down. And then I went back to bed. You have trouble falling back to sleep. And then I fell back to sleep, and that's when I woke up again. So on the plus side, I am sleeping. Sleep doesn't always come very easily to me these days, but I've been trying to make some lifestyle adjustments so that I will sleep better, in terms of eating better, not eating certain things after a certain time, just trying to do certain things that work with my body. And they seem to be helping to a certain degree. I feel like my sleep is not so terribly interrupted the way it often is, because there's some nights where I only get 3 hours of sleep, and then I wake up and then I'm cranky in the beginning of the day because I haven't really slept well at night. So I slept pretty good, and I did have dreams, but we won't go into those today. I do have a one client today, and I am also working on. As somebody who is a reader, frequently, and I don't want to say this happens with all readers, but I've often seen it's the case that if you have been a reader for a long time, and I mean by that a card reader, that you may at some point make your own deck. And I'm working on my second one now, and they're not tarot decks. They are other oracle decks that are based on other stuff that either I get or that I feel like I need to do. Now, this particular deck, I did a deck about, I want to say it was in 2020. I had done one again because I think it was during the COVID lockdowns that all the images to me. I just started painting them, and then once I painted the images, I decided which ones. Because literally, I'm not what you would call a great artist, but I do have days where I will just suddenly be compelled to paint. I have watercolors. I was trained in watercolor, but I don't consider myself to be any kind of brilliant artist, but I produce stuff that I like, and if I don't like it, then it gets scrapped and used for something else. I also do a lot of collage work, which people who have seen my books that I put out through Katonia Books, a lot of that artwork is my own collage work that I've done on the cover. Now, some of it maybe is, it's your judgment whether you like it or not. Generally, I share my artwork with Patreon. I have a Patreon for my Katonia channel, and that is where I will often share that work before I do anything with it and get some opinions. But in any case, I had made the decision I was doing all of these paintings that were based on things I was seeing in meditations. And then later on, I said, okay, well, I'm going to turn, I think it's about, I want to say there's 23 of them or 24 of them that I turned into cards. And then I had to sit down and write, what do these cards mean? And it was really interesting because it just flowed. A lot of times when you're doing spiritual work, we'll refer to that as a download, where you are, and it's not necessarily that it could be coming from yourself, whether it's coming from another voice or not. I mean, sometimes it's hard to say. I personally feel this is stuff that comes from my guides, so it's not just, it's definitely not stuff that it's certainly not that I would consciously think about, and it could be downloaded from the from the unconscious mind as well. But nonetheless, whatever, it does tend to end up being somewhat profound. And when I have used at least the first oracle deck, I do notice that the people I've used it with say that it's a very powerful deck. That it was very powerfully accurate. But I find I only use it sometimes and for certain types of questions. Now, the new deck I'm making, I have a folder here with the cards in it, and this is I'm just sort of getting started with it, but I'm writing it, I'm just started with the lettering on it because this is an angelic deck, and so one of the things that I'm going to say asked to do is to make a deck that is in Enochian, which is the language of angels. If you're not familiar with that, John Dee and Edward Kelly were the ones who channeled that at the time of Queen Elizabeth I. He was Queen Elizabeth I's court astrologer. But he was also a mathematician. He was a cartographer. He was a lot of things, John Dee. But he was known. He's known very widely in magic circles and people who are in esoteric circles. For this particular angelic language and the transmissions. And I think, as I had mentioned in my intro video to Transition Life Coaching, the new version, the new website, I had mentioned that I had done some work called what they call Enochian calls. Now, it's been years since I've done it, but generally it's where you basically, what they call opening, usually it's the 30th aether, you're opening this aether, and then you are doing what they call scrying work, so you're actually looking in to see what messages come to you from those particular aethers, and there's a whole ceremony that goes with it. So I mean, it's been a long time since I've done anything like that, but I do have some familiarity. I mean, I can't say I know the Enochian language, but this is what I have been so I've been working on it, and I'm laughing because I feel like the way that I'm writing these out, because I'm doing it in Enochian, and then I'm doing the transliteration of the Enochian, and then I'm doing the text, and so I'm saying, okay, I feel like I'm writing Enochian flashcards. It's kind of funny, but yeah, it's going to be a lot of cards in that one, and I'm just and because it's for me, whether it becomes a public deck, some people have asked me who know that I've been making it, whether or not it would be a public deck. I don't know. I might be just using it for some of my own work, but everything is fluid, so we'll see what happens. So I think this morning what I want to do, I was trying to think about what I wanted to talk about today, because I like to have I don't know, just me, I like to have some kind of theme to structure things around when I'm doing a live stream, rather than just randomly talking about stuff, stuff that people may or may not care about. Some of the themes that came up this morning when I did my grounding ritual and then doing some preliminary work was that looking at the theme of comparison. And because when we're talking about transitions, okay, because obviously that's my focus. My focus is helping people manage major transitions. And oftentimes, like I said, the person who gets in the way of a transition the most a lot of the time is ourselves. Because it's not that we don't have the resources and the capabilities, but we are afraid that we're not, we're already projecting that it's going to fail. It's not going to work. I had a 9-to-5 job that was stable, and I'm using the career thing as an example. There could be other things too. Somebody could leave your life, and you could say, oh, I don't know how I'm ever going to get on without that person again. And again, depends on the circumstances. I know there's been some cases of people who have been when you're dealing with grieving and loss, like when you're dealing with death. That's something that takes a lot of time and you need a lot of self-care and space to deal with those wounds, depending on the nature of the relationship and sometimes even the nature of how the ending took place. People tend to feel differently about endings if somebody say is in their 90s and passes away and there's, that's one type of ending. Where people may still miss and are still going to miss and grieve that person being in their life, but it's not the same as, say, somebody in their 20s dying suddenly, or somebody being killed, or somebody, those are all different types of death experiences. So you can't kind of make a blanket statement about how death will affect people. And again, the nature of the relationship matters. If somebody tells me that a person died, now obviously if it's something really tragic, then I would say, oh, that's really horrible. But if I don't know the person or have any connection to them, it's not going to affect me as much as it is the person who is close to them. That's just how it is. And sometimes you can pick up those kind of things. One thing I always have to be very careful of is emotionally, I'm a bit like a sponge. I pick up a lot of emotions around people, so I have to be very careful that. Because I've had days where I can very suddenly get out of sorts about things, and then I'm like, why am I, I mean, you could attribute some of it to life changes, to hormones, to things like that, because I'm certainly experiencing issues with that. But it could also, I feel it's also that I'm, a lot of times I'll discover sort of after the fact, especially if I'm doing a reading for somebody, I will have the emotions of that person. So, if I'm going to be reading for somebody, say, who has been very, very anxious and very stressed about a change that's coming up, that whole day I might be anxious and stressed, and I'm like, why am I anxious and stressed? Everything's fine, there's not really a good reason for it. in terms of what's going on in my life, but you sometimes pick it up from others. And so I have to be very careful to say, okay, I have to recognize that they're not my feelings. And yeah, and so I'm trying to, I have a client coming today. I'm trying to gauge the feelings that I have today. One of my rare clients who comes to the house. I don't have too many clients that come here, just because I'm not really equipped where I live. I don't have there's not parking space on the road. Basically, when I have clients in, I have to move my car so they can park in my drive. And now they're going to start doing road work. I mean, which is good, because my road has actually been in terrible shape for years. And there's been a lot of complaints, and then our town did pretty much every road except our little piece of road. And I think people have been, I mean, I have complained. I try not to blame too much on the Department of Public Works, because I know that I've dealt with the head of the department many times. And there's a certain amount that I know too, because I used to work for government, that it is out of their hands. They may want to do something, but they just kind of go, they'll go to town hall and complain like during a meeting, and a lot of times when I, even when you go to the clerk, they'll be like, oh, well, you got to ask DPW, and DPW is like, we need to get money, and the county needs to give us money, and so in any case, they finally obviously got money because the road apparently got bad enough. So, but I'm still waiting to see when they're going to do the work and how that's going to disrupt my week. But, we'll see. Anyway, I was talking about comparison, and it was a card that popped up this morning in my Osho Zen deck when I was just doing a quick reading. Not so much for myself. I mean, I did do another reading for myself, but just one that was more open for these other things. And the Osho Zen reading, basically that was the card that popped up. That and Clinging to the Past were the two cards that really had popped up. And those are both in the fives. Now, again, if you follow this Instagram feed, you know that I did a whole discussion of the fives and what they mean in terms of psychology, because fives have to do with psychological struggles. Like aces are the first cards, and they have to do with new beginnings. Okay, we're starting fresh. Something new is coming in. When you move into the twos, this is where you could either be partnering or you could be negotiating two things. Sometimes this is where choices are being made, depending. The threes is where you're branching out and perhaps either working with others or deciding not to work with others. The fours bring a level of stability, and when you get to the fives are about struggle. Okay, there's something you're struggling with, because there's the Five of Cups, which is, grieving, hanging on to the past, mourning or looking back with regret on something. Okay, that's that very emotional five, and it's the one that says you need to look at the cups that are full, not the cups that are empty or that are spilled. Because in that card, at least in the Rider-Waite version, there's two cups that are flipped over and they're spilled, and then there's three that are still standing behind the person, but the person has their back to the cups that are full. So the idea is that, you take whatever time you need for mourning something, but then you turn around and recognize that you have something. I always feel that the Four and the Five of Cups are similar, because they both have to do with not really seeing what it is that you have. Okay? Now, the Five of Pentacles has to do with when we feel either left out in the cold by somebody, by a group or a person, or whether we feel poverty, a lack of abundance. Okay? And Five of Wands is when we are in competition with people. Okay, and it doesn't have to be anything serious. Oftentimes it's meant to be more of a playful card, but it can indicate quarrels and conflicts with others who might be getting up in our business. And then the Five of Swords which is the comparison card in the Osho Zen deck. Sometimes it's characterized as a card of defeat or a card of jealousy. And different decks represent it differently, and it's interesting to me, because Five of Swords is a card of limitation. Okay, it definitely deals with feelings of defeat, feelings of despair. It's people throwing down their swords and walking away and saying, "I give up. I can't fight this battle anymore," or "I'm stuck." And a lot of times, and then it gets connected in with jealousy, because what it is you're comparing yourself to somebody else. In the Rider-Waite version, there's a person standing with the sword looking over his shoulder, and he's kind of smirking, and there's two people who have left their swords on the ground and they're walking away. So it's almost like he's very smugly triumphant in this particular situation. But this a lot of times has to do with group dynamics and has to do with the way in which we say that, look at ourselves and we compare ourselves to other people and say, you know, oh, I'm not as good as that person. I'm not as attractive as that person. I don't have what that person is. What I get a lot of the times from people is people who meet me will say, oh, well, they'll think that I'm like really, really smart. And they'll say, oh, well, you know, I can't carry on with you because I'm going to sound stupid. I've heard that, and I'm like, and it's ridiculous because no, you're not going to sound stupid. I don't, to me, I feel everybody has something to offer. People don't have to, I mean, I'm into a lot of things, you know, I'm kind of nerdy about these kind of things that I like. And some of them are very odd things, which can make me very interesting to you, or it can make me a colossal weirdo. It all depends on your point of view. But, you know, for the people who are interested in what I'm doing, yeah, it's a great thing, and I love to talk. And if people are not interested in it, you know, I'm interested in things that other people are doing too. It's not all about me. But when I'm here doing my work, of course, I'm focused on me and what I'm doing. But I don't assume when I start talking about things that it's like with my students. When I start talking about things in the psychological level, I don't assume that they have a graduate level knowledge of what I'm talking about. I assume that they're going to be approaching it from a beginner's mind, so to speak. And not because, and again, not to make that comparison, not to say, oh, I'm so great and I know so much and you know nothing. I mean, it depends on the context. If I have students who come in and try to tell me, like, oh no, the lecture on this thing was completely wrong because I watched one YouTube video and I know that this is what it is. I'm like, no, you're wrong. I am the expert here. Sorry to tell you this, but, you know, that does not make you an expert. I mean, you're entitled to your own opinion on something, but that doesn't, you know, and especially when it comes to stuff like that, generally when you're presenting things within the humanities, you're presenting it from one particular point of view. So like in my case, mine is psychoanalysis. I deal with that when I teach myth. Other people like to teach it from the point of view of popular culture. So they like to say myth in terms of how it plays out in film or in other, you know, TV shows or other things, like where that might be somebody's expertise. Someone else might look at it from an anthropological point of view. Okay, might look at it in terms of human origins and history and things like that. So it can be, there's a lot of different ways that you can approach these questions depending on the discipline you're coming from. My approach tends to be fairly interdisciplinary, but I would say it's probably mainly, and I'm saying psychoanalytical rather than psychological per se, because psychology now means a whole lot of things, and even within the humanities that it didn't mean probably several years ago. In the past, you would have assumed like Freud and Jung when you're talking about psychology, and the Freudians like Carol Gilligan or Karen Horney or Bruno Bettelheim. You know, you would have assumed those people. And now we're talking about, even Julia Kristeva, I guess, to some degree. But now we're talking about, you know, cognitive, I got out of being the chair of psycho-religion for the American Academy of Religion because they started talking about cognitive psychology of religion and neuroscience of religion. I'm like, that to me is like a complete waste of energy. I mean, there's people who are doing it. When I was there, I was accepting papers in it, but okay, it's not that you can't look at it from that perspective, but I don't feel like it really tells you anything. And I feel it plays into the idea that everything is just chemistry and doesn't have to do that bigger picture is not important, or somehow it's just an accident that, you know, you dream at night or that you have these kinds of connections. It's just this, this fear of what is unpredictable, or maybe what feels overwhelming, and then trying to like box yourself in to say, no, what I see in front of me is literally all there is, and it has no meaning. And again, meaning, I've always felt that life, I say, okay, does life have a meaning? I tend to agree with Joseph Campbell that life, when you're alive, it's more about having an experience of being alive. It's not about having a purpose or meaning in life. I mean, we may talk about it, we may look for purpose because we are human beings, that with the way that our consciousness is wired, we want to do something that we feel is productive, okay? But in doing so, we we kind of have this this idea that that we're doing something meaningful in a broader sense, and maybe we are. I'm not saying that maybe we're not, but I think in terms of life itself, the real key, and even people who seem to feel that they have some kind of a purpose, is like you still want to have that experience of being alive. If you're dragging yourself through your routine every day, and it's just like, well, I guess I better get up and do this again. I mean, we all have days when it's harder than others to get up and get on with things, but if that is kind of your modus operandi, and that's what that defines your life, there's that element of being stuck and limited, right? There's that limitation. You want to be able to break out of those limitations. And when it comes to comparison, don't compare yourself to other people, and don't compare yourself to your past self. Okay? So I could look at myself now, for example, and what I'm doing and say, okay, well, when I had a job, I made X number of dollars per month. Now I make this amount, and then I start comparing and contrasting, and it's like, look, don't compare those two things. They're two completely different things. And when you change, it's kind of like the dream card that I pulled yesterday. It's like every day is almost like a brand new day. Don't always, I mean, but because we tend to look for causal patterns in things, we say, oh, well, in the past, these were my experiences. Or, you know, this is what my, or even worse, there's kind of like expectation versus result. Like what was my expected outcome, and how did the actual outcome measure up to what I expected? And I see Jenny has joined. Good morning, Jenny. And so it's kind of what are your expectations? One thing my guru always had said to me was drop your expectations. That the happiest people have no expectations of anything, and that really is contrary to the kind of society we live in, the kind of goal-oriented society that we have. So it's and so to say no, just live every day without expectations. That's also a very hard thing to do. But this way we not only not compare ourselves to other people, but we don't compare our present performance with our past or with something maybe we were doing in the past, because things change, our lives change. There may be some things that we were keen on doing when we were younger, and now as we get older, we're like, no, I don't want to do that same thing anymore. I can't do that same thing anymore. So you're in a new place, and and the problem comes in when you keep going back to the old thing and saying, oh, excuse me, well, I have to do it like this. You know what I mean? And the whole point is you're not supposed to do it like that. You want to do it in a new way. But when we don't know the new way, we fall into these patterns. Being we're getting kind of late in this live stream, and now this is me in the early morning with the dealing with the allergies, everything that's gone up and goes down, and of course this is a brilliant time of year for it, so I am struggling a bit with that. But let me do a Osho Zen reading before I run out of time here, because people who know me know that I can talk incessantly forever about certain topics. So let's see what we got. Let's see if we get our comparison card this morning. Wow, this is so interesting. Okay, yesterday when I did this, the first card I got was past lives, and I've gotten it again. So yeah, again, this is the idea of repeating past patterns and releasing those and letting them go. And then we have, the internal feeling of which we are not aware here. Well, there's the unconscious and then there's the conscious in these particular readings that I do. We have the flowering card, which is the Queen of Pentacles. And this card has to do with, this suggests that there's an inner flowering going on. Now, one thing I had seen in a lot of readings across the board for other people, because I'm working on the readings for Liminal Tarot for the week. I did 3 readings yesterday. I'm going to do 3 more today, and I'm going to post them all tonight for tomorrow. But one thing I have noticed is the earth element coming up a lot. Empress card, Pentacles cards, the earth card in Cartouche. And I think what it is it's like, there's this thing of what are you planting right now, what's getting ready to flower, what's getting ready to grow. I think I even said a couple of days ago about don't try to pick the flower while it's still in a bud stage. You want to wait until it opens up. You know, you don't want to do anything prematurely. It's back to our discussion of timing, right? But this suggests to me that for a lot of people, there's an inner flowering that's going on right now, or something is just about to burst out. And I think though, when we keep remaking these past connections, when we keep saying, whether, like I said, whether it's literal past life trauma, which again, I don't want to go off on the tangent about what that means for different people who believe in different things. But even if you want to look at it as ancestral trauma or things, you know, family patterns, things that are connected to the past, it can mean a lot of different things. But when you're dealing with that kind of issue, it's the stuff that is so deeply buried, it's really hard, even when you consciously work through it. You could work with a therapist, say. You could be doing coaching with me. You could be doing, you could just be doing explorations on your own with any variety of modalities to work on this material. And it just seems like it's endless. It's like the bottomless pit of stuff that just comes up. And sometimes it's the same stuff. And you kind of go, I thought I dealt with that. I thought I put that to bed. But frequently we haven't. So the past lives card it seems to indicate the way in which the past is sort of impinging on the present, or the way in which we need to release that in the present. And it's not that easy to do. But we are at this point of flowering. And then, yeah, we have, again, this card came up before. What we are aware of is change. Something is definitely changing. I know certainly I have felt that way, that there has been a shift. One of the things that I do, because obviously as somebody who reads cards, I also look at nature, because I like to feel very connected to nature and to the signs in nature. And one thing I have noticed is the movement of birds in the morning. And I know what's typical for my area. There's certain animals I'm used to seeing, and there's certain birds that I'm used to seeing. And the other day, I posted a really terrible picture of it on Facebook because I was trying to zoom in with my camera and it just gets pixelated. But I had a little goldfinch that actually appeared, and we don't typically get finches around here. But there was a goldfinch. You know, my neighbors cut some brush and it's kind of piled up there, and of course the town's not coming until like June to pick it up, so it's kind of just been sitting there. But the birds have been like bouncing up and down on it. I've been seeing a lot of cardinals. And cardinals are not necessarily unusual. Some of their patterns were a little unusual in the way they were behaving. Robins, of course. And then I just saw this one little yellow finch. And I thought, that's usually a very good sign. It's a sign of exactly this, of prosperity, about something that's about to bloom. And whether that's financial prosperity, whether that's some other kind of abundance, because abundance doesn't just have to be in money form, okay? Something that's about to come to fruition. So there's a change that's coming, and it's being kind of reflected in our environment and reflected in things. And I feel like it's something that it's not just going to be happening for me or just for one person. This is something that's going to be happening for a lot of people. There's some current that we need to flow with, okay? Rather than continually trying to go back and relive and redo the past thing. Okay, so what it's requiring of us, this is the advice card, is courage. Okay, and so what you see here is you see the rocks and you see the flower that manages to push itself up through the rocks. So I think lately, with a lot of what's gone on, I think people feel like it's been like a battle, because there's a whole lot that's gotten torn open during eclipse season, coming to truths about people, coming to truths about situations. Maybe miscommunications sometimes have revealed things, or just there could just be these kind of cataclysmic little shifts, or, well, cataclysm isn't little, right? But shifts, like could be major shifts, or they could be just enough to unsettle the life that we've had, or kind of push us in a new direction. And so it's saying, something is about to flower, you need to have courage. Now, the outcome we have is awareness, which is the Chariot card in this deck. And as you can see, this is like a person, like a shadow person, but you're seeing the person emerge. So there's a clear person emerging out of this shadowy being. So clarity is coming on things, okay? We are moving into a space. And not only that, but the awareness card as the Chariot would indicate being able to move ahead, having the the impetus to be able to, to take control of our situation in as much as we can. When you're in a cycle like this, the paradox is that sometimes in order to have control of something, you have to let go of control. Sometimes giving up. I was starting this by talking about the Five of Swords. Stop comparing yourself. Just sometimes there is a sense of just giving up on the idea of your limitations. Everyone keep going, but I can't do this. Oh, it didn't work out this way, so it's all done. I can't do anything with it. There's another way. If one way is not working, there's another way. If it's something that if it's something that's right, if it's the right thing for you to be doing, okay? And your own inner voice, however you want to interpret that. Because again, some people I coach with are not, it's kind of weird because I do spiritual coaching, but sometimes there's people who are not very spiritual who come for coaching anyway. And they may say, oh yeah, but I'm not into that whole thing. It's like, okay, but you still have inner guidance. You still have a quote unquote inner voice. You still have a sense within you that tells you what is right and wrong for you in a particular situation. And most of the time we ignore it because our brain overrides it. Oh yes, but this is what happened before. Oh yes, but what if this happens? Oh yes, well, and so we do that to ourselves repeatedly. So this is really about, having the courage to kind of break those past patterns. And that's kind of what I was seeing this morning is just, don't compare yourself to others. You have your own gifts, and those are the things that really need to shine here. And don't limit yourself in terms of who you associate with or what your experiences are on that basis. Especially if you think, I don't measure up or I'm not good enough. That's not an attitude that other people have towards us. And if you do run into people, by the way, who have the attitude of like, well, I'm better than you. Typically, those people are probably people who don't have a very good opinion of themselves. Okay, that to me, people who kind of, I'm going to call it the mean girl thing or the bullying thing, whether it's men or women who are doing it. That usually comes out of that's a defense. That comes out of a sense of weakness and somebody feeling I'm weak and I don't measure up, and so they respond to it by immediately trying to take this almost narcissistic kind of position because because the reality is that the ego that they're living in, the ego identity that they have is very frail. And that's how they defend themselves. But in the same way that you have the fish who just like puff themselves up, when an enemy is around, it's that kind of a thing. So the only response to that would be not to take any of that personally. Don't take the world personally, because when that happens, it's not really about you. Similarly, we have to take back our projections because a lot of the times we may look at other people and say, I don't like that person. I think that person feels this way towards me. I think they're mad at me. I think, and really what the reality is that person is probably, that may not be the case at all. It just, they could look or act the way that they look for a reason that has absolutely nothing to do with you. But we project that because if we're feeling a certain way about ourselves, remember, it's like you're living in a hall of mirrors. So and just like you don't know what you look like unless you look in a mirror, okay? You can't really see you without a mirror, right? Similarly, you can't see your personality without a mirror. So what's happening is being bounced back to you from other people all the time. So your response to people, positive or negative, and again, if you're an empath, there's a whole level of picking up other people's emotions and feelings and whatever else you might be doing from that perspective. But but nonetheless, you don't exist in a vacuum. You get to know who you are based on your interactions with other people, and that is how you get to know yourself. Okay, I have time for one more card really quick. I'm actually at 5 after, but let's just see. Okay, and this is an essential oil oracle card. I decided to keep it simple today, and our oil is topical oil, which is interesting. I often wonder what essential oil blends that these cards are based on, because obviously different companies make different ones. So, okay, well, the key word on this card at the top is harmony. And the trigger statement is, I'm boiling over. The true statement is, I allow myself to feel. Give yourself space to decompress and take time to nurture your body, mind, and spirit. Allow emotions to surface and release. Yeah. That's another thing too. And I don't want to go too far on that tangent, but yeah, that's certainly been a component of this time, certainly for myself and for other people. A lot of, there's the idea that you're waking up every day and certain emotions have boiled to the surface, or perhaps people are dealing with things where those emotions are finally, things that perhaps have been repressed and buried are now, the door's open and they're all kind of coming out. And I think this is why we have that past lives card, why we're trying to deal with all of that material at one time. But again, the answer to dealing with emotions is not to push it, not to repress it, but to allow yourself to feel it. And a lot of times we don't want to feel it, especially if it's an uncomfortable emotion. But that really is the way through. You really do want to allow yourself to experience the emotion and allow it to pass. Because for the most part, obviously people who have incredibly traumatic emotions or, suicidal ideation or things like that, definitely talk to somebody in that case. Don't try to sit there with that one by yourself. And that's the other thing too. We do have friends, we do have people who we can talk to when our emotions are very, very intense. I think a lot of times we feel like, I'm going to burden that person with my emotions, and then we don't, and we kind of keep everything in. But we all of us have people who are part of our support group. So, make sure that you make use of your support group and make sure that you are allowing yourself to express. That said, sometimes you also need to be careful that whatever you authentically feel emotionally, if people try to tell you you're wrong, like, oh no, you don't really feel that or whatever. I've heard that where people will say, well, I went and talked to this person and they said I was full of it, or I was, and it's like, okay, well, maybe that's not the person you want to talk to. Because, you want to make sure that you're also true to what authentically you're feeling. And if other people don't agree with it, then, but you still have to go through your own feeling. Whether in the end you're proven to be right in how you feel about something or not, you kind of have to work through it. So, so I feel like for a lot of people, there's still this this cleansing that's going on, and there's a lot of these different issues that are coming up. So, okay, I'm well past time. I want to say thank you. Thanks for joining me this morning, Jen. It is a Sunday morning, so I didn't really expect too many people to necessarily come on. But this is going to be available, obviously, on Instagram in Reels, and it's going to also be available on YouTube probably later today. I usually like to try to get these up in the morning, but I'm also trying to get a whole bunch of other videos up right now. So everybody have a great Sunday, and I will see you tomorrow morning. Take care.